Lenten blessings to you. Now we are on the fourth Sunday of Lent. Now, the fourth Sunday of Lent is also known as Laetere Sunday. Laetere Sunday means Rejoice Sunday. Not to be confused with the third Sunday of Advent, which is known as Gaudete Sunday. That's also rejoice. But actually, uh, Latte Sunday, the priest also wears rose color, uh, you know, uh, robe, like he does on the Gaudete Sunday. The priest wears the rose color or pink color robe twice a year in the liturgical calendar. So those are the days. So this Sunday is another day for the priest to wear the rose color robe. It is because to rejoice. Now, why? Well, it's an intro, entrance antiphon. It says, "Rejoice, Jerusalem, be glad for her. You who love her, rejoice with her. You who mourn for her, and you will find contentment at her consoling breast." And that's from Isaiah chapter 66, verse 10 to 11. So it's always nice to have a moment, a day to rejoice, even though Lent is a solemnly, uh, repenting season. We are making this a spiritual reset, acknowledging our sins. It's like a diagnosing, right? What's the problem? And then based on that, we make a treatment plan and exercise the treatment. So that's what we do during the Lent. Now remember, we cannot do that, self-diagnose and self-cure and all that. No, 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 no. I mean, the secular world might teach that kind of thing, but no. If you're a believer, you know the physician, right? And that's Christ. And actually, speaking of physician, speaking of healing, cure, that's the theme in today's gospel, which is about Jesus healing, uh, um, a man born blind. That means this poor guy never seen anything until he met Jesus, and Jesus intervened on his blindness, and he followed what Jesus told. It's like following the good doctor's order, and he get cured for the first time. Now, of course, it's really, really deep when we reflect on the spiritual meaning that we need to get. Um, so I say this to you, okay? If your eyes, now I'm not talking about physical eyes. Well, of course, it's nice that you can see, physically, but more importantly, if your spiritual eyes are open and can see the truth, that means see the Christ. Remember, Jesus said, "I am the truth," right? And of course, the life and the way, and He's also the light. And of course, to see. Now, this is the same, both spiritually and physically. To be able to see, we have to have the light, right? And that's also what we learn in the biology and the physics, because photon affects the retina, and then that energy of the photon is going to be converted into this neuroelectrochemical Energy and then goes to the brain, and then brain interprets. You know this biology, right? And also in the physics, right? To 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 be able to see an object, we need a light because in the darkness we cannot see anything. So likewise, we need the Christ the light to see the truth. Okay, so if your eyes are open and see, enjoy the benefit of light and be able to see the truth, then you can rejoice. You are happy, you're so glad, you're grateful. But if you're blind, I'm sorry, you have nothing to rejoice. So we'll see. Okay. Um, so if you read the scripture for this Sunday and you rejoice, then your eyes are certainly open. But if not, well, you might be blind. Okay. Even though your eye doctor said your vision is 20/20, but spiritually it could be otherwise. Okay, so what is today's reading? The first reading comes from the First Samuel, chapter 16, 1b, and then from 6 to 7 and 10 to 13a. And the responsorial psalm is Psalm 23, and the refrain is, "The Lord is my shepherd, there's nothing I shall want." And then the second reading is from Paul's letter to the Ephesians, chapter 5, from verse 8 to 14. And the gospel reading is from John, chapter 9, from verse 1 to 41. And I know it's long, like last Sunday. Um, and actually, okay, so let me just, if you don't want to watch all the way to the end of this video, just really quick, sort of like a gist or summary about those three readings. And I like to connect those three readings. So, connecting those three readings, basically, this Sunday's readings is really about whether you're blind or not. Now, again, blind in regard to or being able to see the truth. Now, of course, see also means understand or appreciate. And not be able to see in this regard means ignorant. Okay? And of course, if you're ignorant, you cannot understand anything. Okay? So, the first reading is about Samuel. Remember Samuel? Uh, the man who anointed who? David, right? So this is the story about the first reading. It's about Samuel anointing David, but then if you read the first reading, um, Samuel was blind because he was only seeing, you know, outlook. What his naked eye, his physical eyes can see, but he was blind to what God sees. And in this reading, you know, God says, you know, Samuel, you see like a man, humans. You gotta see like I see. And God was saying, I see what's in the heart. So God directed him to find the youngest son who didn't look fit to be the king of Israel. I mean, he was still a kid. And what? But that's how God directed. Now, Samuel thought he's gonna anoint one of the big guys, big brothers. And but God was like, no, 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 none of those. Jesse had a bunch of sons, and David was the youngest and still kid. So it's like, just because what you see in your eyes, it can be disguising or misleading. Okay, so it was just a humbling reminder. Even Samuel had a blind spot and got corrected. Okay, so Samuel followed God's direction and follow God's way because God basically corrected Samuel's blind spot, and then so he was able to anoint the right man, David. Okay, so that's the first reading, and so as I said earlier, the responsorial psalm from the is from Psalm 23, and this is about the Lord as a shepherd who guides. So that's why the refrain said, "The Lord is my shepherd, and there is nothing I shall want." So in on this in this Sunday's context, you know, if you see the truth, you have nothing you desire. It's like a Saint Ignatius Susipe prayer. When he wrote and he said this prayer in his life, obviously he was no longer blind. When he was blind, I'm talking about Saint Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits. Um, he was seeking earthly glory. He was a man of fat ego, you know, and he was rather narcissistic. Now, this is not my word. This is um, it was a father and doctor, what was his name? William Messner, right? I think that was the name. He was a Jesuit psychiatrist slash psychoanalyst in Boston, and so he's not just a Jesuit priest, but also he's a real physician, psychiatrist in psychiatry, but a special training in the psychoanalysis. So he diagnosed Saint Ignatius as a narcissist, now with a narcissistic, personality disorder. But and he was obviously blind. But then, to make a long story short, he encountered Christ personally, as the Samaritan woman in the last Sunday's gospel made up had the personal encounter with Christ. And guess what? Both of those two persons changed. So, and then he realized, the truth is, I don't need anything, earthly things, but His grace. So that's a spiritual exercises number 234. So if you have gone to Jesuit school, attended the Jesuit retreat, you're probably familiar with that. And Saint Ignatius, I don't need anything. So Lord, take everything from me because your grace is enough. So it's like a spring cleaning. I don't need any clutters that 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 can keep your grace from me. So please, Lord, take everything from me. And then Saint Teresa of Avila, um, it's pretty much the contemporary to Saint Ignatius of Loyola, and both of these saints are from Spain, the 16th century. Saint Teresa of Avila said, right, um, "Solo Dios basta" in Spanish. It means, God alone is enough. So, um, so this is like a sentiment or statement made by persons whose eyes are open and can see the truth. So you know, there's nothing I shall want but your grace. You know? So Lord is my shepherd; I shall not want. In burdened pastures, He gives me repose. Right, God's grace. Besides restful waters, he leads me. Restful waters, you know, the living water, right? By the riverside. You can drink from it. He refreshes my soul. Exactly, that's the living water. Refreshing not my body, my soul. And the Samaritan woman in the last Sunday's gospel learned through her experience. So now we are on the epistle, the second reading. So like I said, it's Ephesians from chapter 5, 8 to 14. So Paul talks about, you know, darkness. So the opening sentence is this. You are once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Live as children of light, for light produces every kind of goodness and righteousness and truth. Okay, you are once darkness. We are once darkness. What does it mean? Well, when we are born, we are blind. Now, I mean, biologically, yes. Remember the newborn baby? When he or she just comes out of mother's body, the moment, the baby, well, it's not quite blind, but I think the retina, no, macular, the focus is not quite ready. So the vision is not perfect yet, right? It takes a while for newborn baby. Well, in a similar way, but when we are born, um, spiritually, we are blind. Why? Because of the original sin. Remember the first Sunday of Lent? We read from Genesis chapter 3, the story of Adam and Eve, right? How they become blind. Now, it's really interesting. You say that they become blind. I say to the truth, but they were able to see that they are naked, that they are ashamed. They start hiding themselves from God. That means they start distancing from God, right? So they're going in the more blind and blind. So the Father in heaven sent His only begotten Son to correct our spiritual blindness. So that's how. So that this is where the how where today's gospel kicks in. Okay, but anyway, um, going back to the second reading. So we are once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. So that means because we have met Christ the light. So we are made, you know, able to see because of Christ the light. Um, so live as children of light, for light produces every kind of. So live as a children of light to produce the goodness and the righteousness. Well, to put in connection with the last Sunday's gospel, the story of the conversion and transformation of the Samaritan woman, remember, when her eyes opened to the truth of the living water Jesus was talking, remember that she was responding to Jesus' teaching of the living water like Nicodemus, who was misinterpreting what Jesus said about born again, right? And he was wondering, how can I go back to my mother's body? It's kind of funny, right? I mean, if you know the truth, but Nicodemus being blind struggle. And remember the Samaritan woman also thought that Jesus was talking about a kind of like a special water, but still H2O, So that will like save her trip from going back and forth and back and forth to the well, Jacob's well. And that's when Jesus realized, okay, why don't you bring your husband or call your husband, right? And then, know how story unfolded, right? And then eventually her eyes opened and she realized she already received the living water. And then she went back to her village. She was no longer afraid of those people. And she, remember, she left her bucket by the well. She didn't bring that. And she didn't put that bucket into the Jacob's well. It doesn't matter to her anymore, right? So um, that's that. And then she brought the whole bunch of people, and eventually they became believers. And Jesus framed it toward the end of last Sunday's gospel, right? It's a great harvest. Remember, Jesus said to his disciples, "The fields are ripe for harvest." So that's a wonderful story. So, the children of light produces goodness and righteousness uh, and truth. So basically, replicating in a way that what Jesus does and to imitate Christ. Um, there's a great book written by um, uh, Kemps, right? The Imitation of Christ. This is a great book to read. Um, so then, in the second reading, also says, "Take no part in the fruitless works." Before that, I think because it's a Latere Sunday, I better say this first. Try to learn what is pleasing to the Lord. So, doing the works, imitating, replicating the works of Christ, is certainly pleasing to the Lord. And then remember, Jesus said, right? Going back to last Sunday's gospel, um, both the sower of the seed, that's Jesus, and the reaper, who actually didn't do any work, you know, rejoice the great harvest. Means that the Samaritan woman bringing not only the transformation, conversion of Samaritan woman, but she is bringing the whole bunch of people to believe. So, um, you know, so it's pleasing to the Lord, pleasing to the sower, Jesus. Take no part in the fruitless works of darkness. So once you become the light of the children, the light, you stay out of it. That's not gonna be your business anymore. So, um, and then because that kind of things is shameful even to mention the things done by those people in secret. So in secret, it's like hiding, right? That's what Adam and Eve did in response to their eye being opened. Now, this is like irony or paradox, right? By opening their eyes to recognize they are naked and ashamed, they became blind. And you see this paradox in today's gospel too. So stay tuned, okay? Um, but everything exposed by light becomes visible, for everything that becomes visible is light. So that was how God confronted Adam and Eve, right? Therefore, it says, "Awake, O sleeper, and arise from the dead, and the Christ will give you light." Right? The Christ will give you light. So, um, we are born, because we inherited traces of the original sin. But the good news is, which is the gospel, that we can be made, our eyes can be made open because of the Christ. Okay. Um, it's like we become children of light. Now it's like a fast forwarding the Pascal visual. You know, you should know this. When we begin this long Paschal Mass, the visual Mass, okay, we I call it the Holy Bonfire because I was just by the entrance of the church. They set up the fire to lit the Paschal candle, the brand new Paschal candle that we get on Holy Thursday to prepare for the Resurrection Sunday to celebrate. So, this visual mass, Paschal visual mass, is basically leads to celebrate the resurrection of the Lord. So it begins with this darkness of the sunset, after sunset, and then it gets dark, and that's when we start on the north hemisphere. Um, and then you know that the Paschal candle is lit, and we have a procession inside the dark sanctuary, right? And then we pass on that light from the Paschal candle. That's basically the Christ the light. He's risen, so the light is back. The church turned into dark, right? The, uh, After uh, the Last Supper on Holy Thursday, and then Good Friday it's dark, right? And then Holy Saturday it's dark. But then, as we begin, right, the Paschal Visual Mass, right, the light coming back, and we each of us at the Mass have a candle lit. So we so this is a really good image that we become children of light. That means our eyes are open. We are no longer darkness. We are no longer ignorant, blind. We begin to see and say, aha. Okay? So carry this into the gospel reading. Okay, so the gospel reading, as I said, is John chapter 9, 1 to 41. That's the original version, and there's a shorter version. But, as you know, I go with the original longer version, so bear with me. So, this gospel is, in John's gospel, there are 7 signs that Jesus performed. Remember the first sign, the turning water into the wine during the wedding party at Cana, and then the second miracle, the great sign is healing the royal uh, officials' child, and then the third, right. The third miracle, the great sign, is that's the healing the lame man um, on the Sabbath day. And actually, that's when Jesus, you know, began to get in trouble with people who wanted to kill him. Okay? Because they got mad at him because he did healing work on the Sabbath day. Now, one of the 10 Commandments prohibit to do the work on the Sabbath day because the Sabbath day is holy. That's when God rested. But remember, Jesus said, right? In that John's Gospel, chapter 5, my Father had been at work, but then until now, and then now I'm doing His work. Right? And then in the Synoptic Gospel, Jesus said, right, I am the Lord of the Sabbath. So, uh, well, that indicates that, you know, yes, the God, the Father, the Creator rested on the seventh day after working for 6 days straight in creating the universe. We created on the last day. So we are to rest on the Sabbath day. But Jesus was saying, he has the same authority. And then Jesus, in the rest of the gospel story, Jesus identified, right? Uh, I'm not doing on my own. Everything is according to the Father. What I learn from the Father, what I see in the Father. So, and then fast forward John chapter 10, verse 30, Jesus said, right? The Father and I are one. Because, and then verse 38 of chapter 10, right? I in the Father and the Father in me. So, um, basically, Jesus shared the same authority. That's why he says also in John's Gospel, I am the light, I am the good shepherd, right? So, and also last Sunday's Gospel, you remember Jesus said, I am, you know, you're, to- you're talking to me, it is I am. Because when the Samaritan woman, began to feel, wait, it's something to do with the Messiah. And Jesus says, yeah, that's me. I am, So, and then, okay, so that was the fourth great sign. And then walking on the water, I'm sorry, no, feeding the great multitude, right? At least 5,000 out of what? uh, 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, and that's John chapter 6. And then also another, so that's what, number 4. Then number 5, uh, walking on the water after feeding the great multitude, and then Jesus crossed the Sea of Galilee. And then, so today's gospel is from the uh, you know, sixth great sign out of 7 great signs. And the next Sunday, we are reading the gospel story of the seventh great sign, which is Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. Okay, so anyway, it's a little bit of introduction about this Sunday's gospel. So this comes from John chapter 9, as I said, verse 1 to 41. So as he passed by, he saw a man, blind from birth. So this man was born blind, never seen any light. So the disciples asked Jesus, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Now, there, I think those disciples are maybe thinking of the Torah. Now, they're all Jewish men, so they probably know something about Torah. So that's probably reflecting what Exodus chapter 20, verse 5 says. It's like if you worship the wrong deity, well, that's a sign of blindness, right? Worshiping the wrong God, kind of thing. Uh, you know, your father's sin can affect, on his children, you know, and children of those who hate God. So basically, it's like a curse, right? Go on the generations to come. Well, the good news is in the next verse, Exodus 20, verse 6, it says, but, God bestows mercy all the way to the thousandth generation on the children of those who love God and keep His commandment. So so probably disciples saying, "Oh man, that poor guy. It's either he or more likely that his parents, sinned. That's why he get this poor thing." Well, what was Jesus' response to it? Jesus said, "Oh yeah, you guys know the Torah." No, no. Jesus responded, "Neither he nor his parents sinned." This is very important. It is so that the works of God might be made visible through him. I think we need to pause, you know, upon this verse. So someone is in a bad condition, right? And Jesus was saying, so that the works of God can be made visible to us, to the world. What does it mean? This is a really good thing to reflect, like, why me when we have a moment? Why me? Why I have to suffer like this? Why my cross is heavier than my neighbor or my brother? It's like a start feeling the neighbor's pasture is greener and you wonder why? Why? Then we need to remind, life is not fair. Jesus never said the life is fair. God didn't make our life fair because God didn't make everyone in a cookie cutter way, right? We are not made in the mass production in a factory. No. God designed us in a very unique way. I mean, find someone with the exact same DNA. You cannot find it, no matter how many billion people there are on Earth. That's the reminder, even a scientific reminder. You are unique, created by God. The all the molecular alignment arrangement to make your DNA so unique. It's who designed it, right? It's not by accident. It was God. So keep that in mind. So, um, you know, if you find your life is not fair, your burden is heavy, well, God is about to show, manifest, let His works manifest through your suffering, your burden, whatever you want to complain, so that when your eyes are open that truth, then you find a deeper meaning of your suffering or whatever you want to complain. And then that's basically what, redemptive suffering can be. So, so that's what it is. So you don't have to just keep complaining, why me, why me? Okay. No, it doesn't say that this man born blind was complaining. Maybe he was doing, I don't know. But so verse 4, we have to do the works of one who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light. Remember, I am. And also, again, he said he's the light. And John chapter 8, verse 12, so Jesus said, I am the light of the world. Now, those saying of Jesus is actually, you see something really similar um, in the next Sunday's Gospel from John chapter 11. Um, Jesus says something like that. First, his disciples, why he was delaying to see Lazarus. Now, I'm talking about, give you a sneak preview for the next Sunday's Gospel about, the death and resurrection of Lazarus, the brother of Martha and Mary. Because when their brother Lazarus was really sick, those sisters sent Jesus a message, right? My brother is really ill, so basically, please come. But Jesus purposefully delayed his visit. He actually waited till Lazarus died, and I was like, why? Well, it was because the same thing, so that what Jesus said. Um, this is what Jesus said. I'm glad for you, disciples, that I was not there when he was dying, that you may believe, so that you guys will believe, who I am. So because he was thinking, okay, I'm gonna let my divinity manifest and doing a really big, make a really big, really big sign, which is raising the dead and Lazarus. And so, not just the disciples, Martha and Mary will also believe. It's like, well, Martha believes, giving you more about the next Sunday's sneak preview, but, yes, I believe, resurrection on the last day. So, okay, so I'm gonna confirm that kind of thing. Okay, so, um, that's how the works of God manifest to make people believe, to open more eyes. So that's the thing. So basically, that's what Jesus is saying, so that the works of God be made visible through this, blind man. Um, and then Jesus spoke more about something really interesting here. This light. Once again, I think it's very important. So he was saying something like this, right? Uh, Verse 4. We have to do the works of the one who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. Well, don't think of the night shift, okay? Um, so do the work of the one who sent me. The one who sent me, Jesus saying, means the Father who sent. Remember John chapter 3, verse 16, right? The Father sent his Son, gave his Son. And then in the first letter to John, you read like verse 9 to 10, right? The Father sent his only begotten Son, right? Because he loves us. Um, while it is day. So this means this is a metaphor. While it is a day, that's when Jesus is alive and walking, making himself visible in the public. So, before his death on the Good Friday. So, definitely from baptism, his baptism. Now, you may subtract 40 days and nights when he was hiding. Well, I shouldn't say hiding, but he was keeping himself in the wilderness alone and defeating the three temptation by devil. Satan, right? And then he came to the land of darkness. Remember the second Sunday in pre-Lenten ordinary time to start preparing for Lent and reflecting Isaiah chapter 9, right? Remember the Galilee Jesus described was described in the Matthew's Gospel, the land of Zebulun and Naphtali, and here comes Jesus, the light, and doing the healing, preaching the good news. Um, so Jesus was doing, before I died on the cross in Jerusalem, that's the day, and I gotta do the work, and so including all those signs. So back in John chapter 5, when for the first time he did the healing work on the Sabbath day, the healing this paralyzed man. Um, he said, he's doing the Father's work. So uh, the Father sent the Son to do His work through him. So that's one thing to remember. So right, Jesus does the work not when he's dead, right? When he's buried. So before he died, and remember this is John chapter 9, and the way that the John's gospel is structured, the Last Supper is from John chapter 13 to 18. And then after that, as the passion begins and his death. So, the chapter 19, entering the chapter 19, right, you see his death and then burial. So it's like because Good Friday, uh, long gospel reading is from John chapter 18 to 19, I think the verse 42. So so you get the picture, and then the resurrection, and then move to chapter 20. Okay, so we are getting closer to Jesus, being in Jerusalem and going through the Passion, uh, Holy Week. So anyway, we still, so basically Jesus is saying, you know, it's not dark time yet. There's still sun is up, and I gotta do the work, even though it's on the Sabbath day. So that's basically what it is. And actually, now again, I can give you a little bit more sneak preview, because you will find something resonating of this in next Sunday's Gospel from John chapter 11. Um, let me just find that. So Jesus says something interesting. Um, so before he left to see Lazarus, who was already dead by that time. So Jesus said, right? But oh yeah, when Jesus said, "Let's go to see Lazarus," right? The disciples reacted. What, are you going to Judea? Well, you can be in trouble because people in that area has already tried to kill you. So you understand if you keep reading from today's gospel to that. Okay. Um, and then Jesus said, "Let's go to Judea," but then they said, "But you better not, because you can be in trouble again." Well, and then Jesus said, "Are there not 12 hours in a day? If one walks during the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world." And verse 10, John chapter 11. "But if one walks at night, he stumbles, because the light is not in him." So now, John chapter 11, that means, the time, chronologically, it's getting closer to the Holy Week. Jesus going to Jerusalem. By the way, that's you see the chapter 12, right, of John's Gospel. So, um, this is pretty much, before Jesus entered Jerusalem to begin the Passion Week. So, um, you know, well, the day is still remaining. I gotta do one more work, and you guys watch, with Mary and Martha. So, to really strengthen the disciples' belief, and then of course the belief of Martha and Mary, before he entered Passion. Okay, so just keep this light. The time the time of Jesus before his death. So because the darkness start creeping in as his passion, especially after Last Supper. That's why church turned dark after the Last Supper celebration, commemoration on the Holy Thursday. Holy Thursday, and also those who practice this tradition of tenebrae, right? It's getting dark gradually. So, that that's what Jesus was speaking about, this day, night, darkness, 12 hours, the bright time. Okay, so going back to today's gospel, chapter 9 of John's gospel. So now, so Jesus will do something to this blind man. So here's a very interesting thing. Now you probably wonder, right? Jesus spat on the ground, right? Wait, he spat on the ground and made clay with the saliva, his saliva, and smeared that, the clay, made the dust from the earth mixed with his saliva, um, and smeared, applied on this blind man's eyes. What does it mean? It's kind of gross, but according to Saint Augustine, you know, now what was that he's writing? I know that's the number 44. His track. Uh, Saint Augustine. Right. His tractate number 44 on the Gospel of John. So tractate now. Um, so he has this huge writing. His tractates of John's Gospel, the Gospel of John, and tractate number 44. Saint Augustine is like a commentary of the Bible. So referring to John chapter 9. So this is chapter 9. So according to Saint Augustine, okay, um, the spit of Jesus coming out of his mouth is a divinity, his divinity. Okay, it's like a pre-incarnate Christ, and the clay, the ground, the dust from ground, is the flesh. So actually, that's kind of like remember Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, which was the first sentence on the first reading of the first Sunday of Lent. If you remember, um, remember how God created us, right? He brought the dust, from the ground. Now, he didn't spit on it, but he put his breath. So, you know, this divinity, the spit of Jesus coming out of God's mouth, right? It's like God breathed now, Jesus spat. So it can be the Holy Spirit. So, according to St. Augustine, divinity and humanity, the flesh that represents humanity, are put together. Right? So that's the clay. And so it's like this, Jesus smearing the clay made of the dust from the ground and his spit, his saliva. It's like he's applying himself, incarnated Christ, on this blind man, and look what happened. Well, before that, and Jesus said, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam." Now Siloam, it means Hebrew, sent, be sent. So Jesus was sending this blind man with Jesus sticking, smeared on, remember, this clay, according to St. Augustine, represent incarnated Christ with both humanity and divinity. Go wash. Now, yes, physically, but this, now according to St. Augustine, this washing in the pool of Siloam represent the baptism. So we can understand like this. Okay, we are born blind because of the sin of our ancestor Adam and Eve. But when we are baptized, so the sacrament of the baptism, our eyes begin to open, And then when we receive the sacrament confirmation, it's really to make sure our eyes are wide open to see the truth. And I know in reality, many of those kids who receive the sacrament confirmation, I hate to say, but they're faking. They're not really open because how many of those confirmed kids you see every Sunday, right? So, okay, that's the topic of another day. But um, if you receive the sacrament confirmation correctly, and if the confirmation, preparation, education is done right, all of those kids who receive can see the truth wide with their eyes wide open. Okay, but then the baptism, his eyes begin to open. Remember that this newborn baby, their vision is not really clear. They really couldn't see the his or her own mother. It's kind of like a shadowy figure, but eventually it becomes clear. So the baptism is like this. Yeah, it's not blind, but it's not clear yet. So that's why, those kids who received, even though after baptism, go through religious ed, right? To help their eyes, the vision gets better. We're talking about spiritual vision, okay? So, just like that. So, and I like the way that the Saint Augustine really teaches us how we can interpret this gospel. You know, it really makes sense also to connect to the sacrament and our own lives. So it's not just a story about some poor guy who was born blind. So it's about us because we are born blind spiritually, and how our eyes can be made open, and thank God through the baptism, sacrament of baptism. Okay, so that's the verse 7, and so this guy went to the pool of Siloam and washed and came back and able to see. So we can rejoice. Now, and the rest of the story in this gospel, we'll see if everyone is rejoicing. Remember, this is Last Taylor Sunday. So verse 8, so his neighbors and all those people, um, so, wait, is that the same guy who was blind and begging? And some say, yeah, but is he seeing something? He's not acting now like a blind guy. Right, so they're like, what's going on, right? So some said, well, it is. But others said, no, he just looked like the blind guy. It's a different guy. They didn't believe, right? Um, so finally, this guy who was blind, right? Well, someone kind of like, maybe it's possible that's him. So ask him, who opened your eyes? And then he said, oh, the guy whose name is Jesus. The man called Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes and told me, go to Siloam and wash. So, and then they said, who is he? Obviously, they don't know Jesus yet, And this guy said, I don't know, he just know the man called Jesus. Well, his eyes are open, but not really quite 100%, not 2020 yet. It's remember that this conversion, the transformation of the Samaritan woman in the last Sunday's Gospel from John chapter 4, it was also gradual, right? So, so it's really interesting. Okay, so that means our conversion and transformation during the Lent can be gradual. I mean, come on, Lent is not just one day, we have a 40 days. So it can be gradual. Now, here's a really ugly turn. Not just those people around, the Pharisees. Now, by this time in John chapter 9, the Pharisees are very, very critical of Jesus. You know, um, so if you read from John chapter 5 on, right, the tension between Jesus and the Pharisees growing and growing, and then eventually that leads to the killing of Jesus, and then actually again another sneak preview of the next Sunday, the seventh great sign Jesus performed, raising Lazarus from the dead. The reaction to those blind people, the Pharisees, they're deciding to kill Jesus. So that's how we get into the Holy Week. Okay. Um, so the Pharisees make an inquisition, um, and they refuse to believe. Okay. Um, so Pharisee also asked this guy, this man, how he became able to see, and then he said to the Pharisees, Jesus put clay on his eyes, and he washed, and then there he could see. And then so some of the Pharisees said, right, this man is no, referring to Jesus. The guy, whom you said Jesus smear the mud clay and then go wash. He said, is not from God because he does not keep the Sabbath. So the Pharisees are really like obsessive compulsive with this Sabbath thing. And then the same pattern in John chapter 5, when he healed the paralyzed man. Okay? So you can go back and read it. Then you see. And that's how his trouble with the Pharisees began. Began to, grow. So this is another incident. Um, they don't believe, Jesus is from God. And the rationale to refuse their belief is because it's like, hey, if he were truly a man of God, a man from God, he would keep the Sabbath. He won't do anything on you on Sabbath day, but maybe on another day, right? But it was Sabbath day. And so they said that how can a sinful man, because he was sinful, according to the Pharisees, because he violated the Sabbath law, Sabbath commandment, do such a signs? And so then in response to that, there was a division among the people. Uh, some people was like, yeah, maybe, you're right. This guy called Jesus can be from God. Otherwise, who else could do perform such a sign, right? But they say, no, 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 just siding with the Pharisees. No, that cannot be, right? Because this was done on the Sabbath day. Um, so then they said to this the man who was blind, said, what do you have to say about Jesus since he opened your eyes? And then the man said, he's a prophet. So again, you know, this transformation of this blind man is in progress. And then the people did not believe that he had been blind, and again, so they're still doubting. No, that cannot be. Blah blah blah. So they ask him, verse 19. So they ask, his parents. Is your son, who you say was born blind, how does he now see? But his parents was afraid to answer because, you know, um, I mean, really speak the truth. So the parents of this man um, responded to this inquisition. We know that this is our son. Yes, verified that he is our son. That he was born blind, but we do not know how he sees now. Nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him. He is of his age. He's old enough to answer himself. Um, why? Because verse 22. Because those parents. I mean, his parents are afraid because um, because the Pharisees agreed that if anyone acknowledged Jesus as the Messiah, you know, this person will be expelled from the synagogue, the worship place. Now, synagogue is not to be confused with a temple. Okay? There's only one temple. There are many synagogues. Um, he will be expelled from the synagogue. For this reason, his parents just gave that kind of answer. So then, the inquiry again was on this man saying that the Pharisees saying that give God the praise. We know that this man is a sinner. So still calling Jesus a sinner. Um, and this man who was the man who used to be blind says, if he's a sinner, I do not know. One thing I do know is that I was blind and now I see. It's like a song, the Amazing Grace, right? Once I was blind, but now I can see. I see because of the grace. Right? So that's why it's Amazing Grace. So the Pharisees said to him in continuing inquisition, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? And then this man answered, I told you already, you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too? Imagine that really, really makes those, Pharisees mad, saying that do you also want to become his disciple? And the Pharisees ridicule him, so that this man was a lunatic. Um, you're that man's disciples. We are disciples of Moses. And we know that God spoke to Moses, but we do not know where this one is from. You know, remember the second Sunday of Lent, the gospel, right? Jesus in the transfiguration, Jesus was conversing with uh, Moses and Elijah, and that symbolizes that Moses is a fulfillment of you know both of those two men represent the law and the prophets, right? And that's in the Matthew chapter 5, verse 17. Jesus is the fulfillment of both the law and the prophets. So, you know, if you think that you disciple of Moses, well then if there's a Jesus, then you gotta be the disciple of Jesus, but they are blind and choose to be blind, I would say. So then the man um, answered and said to the Pharisees, right? This is what is so amazing that you do not know where he is from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if one is devout and does his will, he listens to him. He listens to him. And verse 32, It is unheard of that anyone ever opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he would not be able to do anything. Now, imagine this man whose eyes are open speaking these words to the man who the Pharisees who choose to remain blind. Okay, I mean, this man tried to help, but and so look at their responses to this man's words. So the Pharisees said to him, You are totally born in sin." See how judgmental? "And you are trying to teach us?" Then they expel, threw him out of the synagogue, basically. Okay, that's verse 34. And then verse 35, when Jesus heard of that, he found this man and said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" Basically saying, "Do you believe in me?" And then this man answered, "Who is he?" "Who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" See, this pattern, this gradual thing, um, yes, his eyes are open, but spiritually, his vision was not 2020. It was like the conversion and transformation of the Samaritan woman, right? She started engaging in a conversation with Jesus. I got curious about, you know, but not quite understanding what the living water, right? But eventually she did. So it's gradual again. But this man is getting really close, you know, and again, having another personal encounter with Jesus. So Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, you know, and the one speaking with you is he." Now remember, Jesus was saying, you know, you are with that person. You are wondering if this man is the Messiah. And so, so this is really interesting that it's a very same pattern here. Um, so imagine like if you're going through this gradual change, conversion during the Lent, you gotta have a personal encounter with Jesus, right? And you hear him. It is I am. I am speaking to you. You know, I am touching you. I am putting my hand. I'm putting the clay on your eyes or ears. You know, to cure you, to remove your blindness or something like that. That would be a really, really great Lenten experience. That's what we should shoot for. So we gotta pray, Jesus, come to me, come to us. I'm a blind man. I need your help. You are my physician. So, um, and then this man said, I do believe, Lord. Right. So his eyes are a vision, spiritual visions 2020. Um, I I do believe. Like, and not only that, this man worshiped Jesus. Then Jesus said, I came into this world for judgment, so that those who do not see might see, and those who do see might become blind. And then verse 40. Okay, before I move, better say something a little bit more about this verse 39, right? I came into this world for judgment. So basically you can see this, well, actually, how Jesus bring this. I mean, this judgment. Um, actually, you gotta read the rest of the story. It spills into actually chapter 10, and so you see this. Except actually, the chapter 10 of John is features with Good Shepherd discourse. Actually, it's a response to the blindness of the Pharisees. Also remember the responsorio psalm, right? The Lord is my shepherd, and the shepherd who open our eyes, then our eyes are open to the truth. We shall not want. We don't envy, you know. We don't see that the neighbors pastures are greener, because we see our good shepherd always leads us to burden the greenest pasture. So nothing we just stick with the Lord. So um so that's the judgment, because Jesus is gonna really really confront, and they become really angry. It's like the motif in the book of Revelation, because you see that the judgment of God, unfolding judgment of God, and see the how Satan and his associate, right, Antichrist, the enemies of Christ and the church, his church, react. It gets really, really angry, angry, angrier, only to be destroyed. So you see that, not the rest of the story, just getting into just the next chapter of John, chapter 10. So bringing, for judgment, he came into this world for judgment, so that those who do not see might see, and those who do see him become blind. So this is like a paradox. Yeah, this is a paradoxical statement Jesus likes to make. Um, so even though we are born blind because of the sin of Adam and Eve, you know, encountering Christ, we believe in him, then our eyes are open to the truth. But those who do see him might become blind. So, those who do see, it's a subjective, Oh, I think I don't need God. I don't need Christ. Because I understand, I'm smart enough. I'm educated, blah, blah, blah. No thank you, no thank you. You're blind, you know. And Jesus said, my judgment will remind you, you're blind. Um, and verse 40, some of the Pharisees who were with him, you know, heard this, Jesus saying, and said to Jesus, "Oh, surely we are not, also blind, are we?" You know, really sarcastic. And then the last verse, 41, Jesus said, "If you're blind, you would have no sin, but now you are saying, 'We see,' so your sin remains." Right? Jesus was saying, reminding. So this is how Jesus was throwing his judgment on those blind people. You know, um, you because you keep saying we see, even though you're blind. That's how you keep your sin to yourself. Um, and also, this is bringing the perspective of social psychology. This is a Dunning-Kruger, effect. Now, Dunning-Kruger effect in the psychology, that's like this person is really ignorant, but he or she thinks he's smarter or she's smarter than other people, and then looking down on the people who are actually smarter than them. Okay, so that's the Pharisees. That's the symptoms of the spiritual blindness. And judgment is like a diagnosis, you know. Remember, Jesus is the great physician, greatest physician. So he cures, but then he gives judgment, diagnosis. So this is the thing. So the challenge to you is, what is our blindness? You know, what is our blind spot we need to work on? And of course, we cannot work on our own. We need the physician, and that's Christ the light. And then remember, you know, in the second reading from the second reading, right? We become light. We become the children of the light because through our encounter and conversion, we share His light and do the great works throughout the righteousness, right? Basically, bringing the fruit of the multifaceted, the fruit of the Holy Spirit. Yeah, that's from the last Sunday's gospel, the living water. And remember then the last Sunday's gospel, um, Jesus said, right? When you receive the living water, you have the like a little tiny spring of the living water. And put this, you know, in this the beginning of the Paschal visual mass. Remember the Christ the light, the Paschal candle light, and we put our candle, little candle, right? And then we pass on each other, and then this, even though the electric light is not turned on the sanctuary, but they see all the lights, you know, coming from the Paschal candle. So the living water, right? What we receive, and then we can share. So that's what the Samaritan woman did. Went back to her town and brought a whole bunch of people to Christ. So, uh, you know, we uh, that's how we become a children of light, and then propagate, and that's also evangelization to which we are called. So, you know, um, this is how we know we are affected by Christ, and our eyes are open by Christ. Our blindness is removed, our ignorance, our darkness is removed, and stay out of the darkness, but bringing the light to them, to do the work of Christ. So, you know, our Lent is now, we already latter part of Lent. So may your Lenten journey, you know, become very meaningful. And I'll see you next Sunday.